Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Charu Paru. Hello, Bryan. Please check out the track Silence Teaches You How to Sing by Ulver from Teachings in Silence, 2002. Let's dive into this. We got 24 minutes of Ulver ahead of us. I'm kind of shaky going into a 20-minute Ulver track, but I don't know. Let's see what they got in store for us. Ooh. There's some of those high-pitched squeaks in here, like little squeals. Almost like audio chirping. So we have this ominous rolling drone in the background. And on top of that, it sounds like signal trying to be heard, trying to be transmitted. As it gets louder, the white noise becomes more prominent, then it comes back down to little chirps. You know, with Ulver, I don't know if this is just an extended intro or if this is going to be the song. 2.5 minutes in, though. It's an interesting sonic idea. I like the intent behind it. The execution, I think, is well done, but I view it from a very artistic angle. It's not something I'm enjoying listening to, although I do appreciate what they're creating. This is also the first track on the album, so... Ooh. Okay. Yeah, as I was saying, it could be an extended intro, not just for the track, but for the album in general. We're still working with a lot of sound effects. Oh, I'm not digging that. But we're bringing a chord progression underneath rather than just a drone, so one step up from that total bass line we started with. notes of longing in this part right here. A lot of destruction in the sound effects. That right there in particular, that crackle into like a bubbling sound. It almost feels like a fire in reverse. A bubbling as the heat rises of like paint or coloring on whatever's being burned, and then the crackling of the fire. But like I said, in reverse of that, you get a scoop back and then a little bit of the crackle of the bubbling. And then in fact, I think that whole effect is reversed anyways, regardless of how you might interpret it. Yeah, I think that's a reverse sound. So once again, pointing towards an inversion of time, the idea of longing for something from the past. Yeah, that sound effect goes along very well with the piano line here. Guitar? That's not a piano. And now we're back to a type of sound effect or environmental storytelling, conveying a sense of narration through non-musical ideas. Okay. Is that a single synth pad? Where maybe the panning is automated alongside the pitch modulation? Lots of reverb. I think there's a little bit of compression on it too. What would you call a regret for something that hasn't happened yet? You already know you're going to feel bad about a decision you're about to make? Preemptive guilt or something like that? That's what I feel in this section, and I don't necessarily think it's entirely from the melody line. There's definitely pain in that, a little bit of sorrow, but I think the sound effects lean into that quite a bit, and I don't know how to express why I feel that way. Yeah, I'm lost on this part. I don't know how to interpret this. But most of the sections have started with something a bit more minimal and noisy. So I expect this to grow into something a bit more cohesive in a second and bringing in a more traditional melody or harmonic idea. Although I guess the vocals are providing... Yeah, there's 3 chords there. That's interesting too. The guitar drone came in the other 2 sections, and that introduced a guitar-led harmony. Now we had a section of voices in a bit of an avant-garde atmosphere, which led to a vocal-driven section in this more traditional part. Also, the hand drum. That's been the first acoustic instrument this entire time. In fact, the vocals are the first acoustic melody instrument too. Okay. Little moving bass line here. And back to something a bit more avant-garde. Okay. That was much more short-lived than some of the other more traditional sections. But it's coming back. I just realized I didn't have much of an emotional read on the vocal ahs. I still don't, actually. roaringy percussion's an interesting tone. With the heavy reverb and pushing it into the background like that, it feels little explosions. Distorted by, I don't know, the sound bouncing off of walls in the distance. I think this section and the last have just been a bit more esoteric than some of the others. I just have a harder time getting an emotional read, or even a narrative one, on some of these avant-garde transitions. I will say at the very least, though, the ominous start has been diminished quite a bit. We do have some sort of oscillating tone over here that's a little off-putting. I don't think it's eerie enough to be ominous, but it's not exactly a positive sound either. Those big drums are kind of imposing, but again, it's all to a lesser degree. Not really moving into a positive realm, but I think we're in a better place than where we started. A lot of the hissing, the crackling, the chirping, all of the more abrasive sounds have been replaced with still odd ideas in general, but I feel like as far as textures go, it's slightly more palatable. There's a low rumble on all of this, but we have a little like radar sonar blooping over there, and this pin drop spring. There's like a second tone over there. It seems random, as far as I can tell. Sometimes every 6 beats, sometimes 6.5. Sometimes it drops when the spring hits. Sometimes it drops just after. The mechanical sound here in the middle. Almost like a 3-hole punch followed by like the sound of a scanner, the little device that passes under the paper. And then heavily compressed. Put a massive filter on it. What does all of it mean? Back to the chirping of the beginning. I don't like this. Got a modem in here? I don't think it's a modem, but it's mimicking many of the sounds of that. Could that represent communication? Connection? Also interesting to put the vocals over here in a way that almost sounds like they're being spoken directly into my ear. Okay. What do you want me to say on this? Oh, jeez. I don't think that this is a song that necessarily works well in this scenario of, hey, you listen to it first time, what's your take on it? It's definitely an artistic track. It does have a few sparse uses of more traditional music theory. We don't really have functional harmony in here. Most of the sections just feature 1 or 2 chords, sort of an idea of tension and release. We did have that 4-chord progression towards the beginning of the song. And that, like I mentioned, represented, what was that? That was the longing part, right? That first main, more traditional part. But most of the chords are just there to create a sense of harmonic movement, not necessarily to evoke a strong emotional release. Melodically, the melodies we do have are cyclical, 1 bar each, maybe at the best. They're there to create a sort of feeling of repetition more so than to build anything, I would say, emotionally off of it. Even just looking at that final part with the vocal having that bum 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 ba bum ba something along those lines. I mean, that's not a really powerful melody. It's enough to get by. It works well as an ostinato. It gets repeated like, I don't know, 20 times or something. But it's not necessarily something that I think is ear catching. It's not a strong hook. It's functional. it gets the job done of being a lead moving part, and that's about where that stops. It's just functional, which I'm going to come back to. That kind of sounds dismissive, but I do have a theory about it, and a hypothesis of what it might represent. Rhythmically, I think this is the only thing we have a strong sense of throughout a majority of this track, is that there's generally some sort of accent pattern in the instruments, or at one point we actually had some drums that lay down a consistent beat. It is really difficult to, or it's really easy to fall into the rhythm, the pulse of the song, even though I wouldn't say that the song is very strong rhythmically either. It just has an indicated pulse. Even in some of the more esoteric sections, you can still find a rhythmic element in all of the oddities working together with their rhythms. It's the one thing in here that I think is the most traditionally musically sound part of the track. Everything else is texture, it's atmosphere, it's abstract art. Like a lot of abstract art, whether it's film or a painting or a sculpture or a dance, you kind of get out of it what you're going to put into it. And what you can put into it is going to change over time as your relationship with the art changes. First time listen, you're lucky to understand what happened, much less how you relate to it. And that's about where I am with this. But I do have a couple of key ideas, particularly regarding the first half, which I resonated with a bit more than the back half. The beginning of the song starts with static. That's it. It's a lot of highly filtered out sounds where you're kind of removing almost all of the kind of removing all parts of the sound except the highest pitch stuff, kind of just removing all the bass, all the mids, most of the treble. And so you're really only getting white noise, some crackling, some hissing, some chirping. I wasn't a fan of this section. I don't like those super high pitched sounds. I've talked about this before. I will say though that there was, I think, a little bit of consideration here, that I think they could have went for some higher pitched tones that I might have found a bit uh, painful to listen to, and they didn't. I think it really stops at that edge. It was uncomfortable but not painful. I like that distinction here, and I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it worked for me. I mentioned that this feels like trying to create sound from nothing. From the utmost silence of the first 5 seconds of the song to barely getting chirps and crackles out, for those to swell up a little bit, to have some white noise present. It isn't really a tone yet, but it is something more than just a thin strip at the top of, at the top point of the sound wave, right? Only getting these little bits of information. We're starting to hear more of it. We do have a drone in the background that to me feels very ominous. I don't know if scary is really what they wanted to go for here. It's not what I get out of the title, but it is what I felt in this opening. This took us into a bit of longing, though. We had a guitar line come in. It felt very melancholic, very much like it was wanting of something it did not have. We had the reversed sound effects going on here that never showed up again, so kind of solidifies my idea that it's a longing for the past. Like I mentioned, that reverse sound effect kind of feels like fire in reverse. You get the crackling first, and then a little bit of a popping as whatever it is beginning to heat up, and whatever combustion effects are beginning to take place before it catches fire. I thought that was a pretty cool sound effect. It worked well with a lot of stuff that was going on, and we still have a lot of textures and sound effects bouncing around this. I'm not sure how to interpret that as much, but I do like the guitar and the harmonic element here. This devolved back into some static. A voice was found and then lost. From here, we go into the synth idea. It's bouncing around in pitches. It's not a smooth melody. It is constant eighth notes, I think. Pitches are just kind of randomly picked. It's bouncing between both sides of the panning also. It's chaotic. I can hear that it wants to form into something. It's really close to being a maybe not necessarily a catchy melody, but something a bit more of a traditional ostinato here, especially for electronic music. There's also some noises going on here, and I think the guitar comes back into the whole thing ends up feeling like regret to me. But as I mentioned, regret for something that hasn't done yet. Almost as if you know what you're about to do is going to harm something that you love, but you have to do it anyways. Like that moment in romance films. I don't know if it really happens in romance films. It happens in action films with a romantic angle to it, usually a love interest of sorts. And maybe you have to, remove their memory of you so that they can live a better life. Actually, that does sound like a rom-com thing, doesn't it? And so you take that plunge. It's going to hurt you in the end. The relationship is damaged, but everything works out better because of it. That's sort of what I get out of that moment. It's a really weird and specific feeling to ascribe to textures. It's something I've never heard in music before, and I heard here, which is pretty cool. I don't know how this ties into the idea of growing a voice in any way, of losing that voice, and this is what comes out of it. Um, but I found that to be an interesting moment, and it kind of works with this rather negative overtone that's going on with this song in general. Here's where I start to lose the thread a little bit. We have random talking here. It's something softly melodic about it. I mentioned the three notes that we have in these random ahs. I don't know if it's singing or talking that comes out of the second vocal part. It's really random to me. But this does give way to our first acoustic ish section. Everything else has been electric instruments or digital instruments. And here we have these hand drums. I don't know what they were. They definitely sounded a bit wooden, though, played with hands rather than mallets or drumsticks. And we have vocals. There's something very warm and human about this point that we don't see anywhere else. I don't really have a strong emotional read on this part. But narratively, I do find it interesting that, what was this, like 60% into the song, we've finally reached the point of bringing in acoustic instrumentation at all. We do have an electric bass in here, though. I do like the bass part. It has a nice moving idea to it. The drum rhythm is nice. Once again, kind of functional. It fits with what the bass guitar is doing, and it just provides a nice bit of movement underneath the vocals. But like I said, I kind of lose the thread here. At this point, we go back to some noise and textures. Don't really click with that. After a couple of minutes, we bring back the chirps from the beginning of the song. And then we have a new vocal ostinato that joins in, and that loops over and over and over until the song wraps up. Lots of reverb on this track. Lots of textures. Lots of noise in general. It never really reaches a point where I think it becomes a traditional song in any sense. So this idea of growing a voice out of silence, in some ways I suppose you can read that it does work. I don't think it really reaches a point of a traditional style of voicing though. It still sits within its more experimental ideas. And so, at least with this track, I don't necessarily know if we have learned how to sing out of the silence. But I think it's only if you take it from a very straightforward angle. I've been thinking about this title this whole time because, really, honestly, I think this is a feeling song. There's a lot to learn from it if you want to go and make experimental music. I think that they did a fantastic job at crafting narrative out of unusual, esoteric, and avant garde sounds. I got lost at the end, sure, but for like 16 straight minutes, I was sort of invested in the story they were telling. Despite it being a slow burn, despite it being unusual and breaking convention, I was still invested. That's pretty rare for me. So there's certainly an academic angle and even an educational angle. If you want to make music like this, dive into this, figure out what works, why it works, what resonates with you, and how you can incorporate that into your music. But I think generally speaking, this is definitely a feeling, emotion song, something you listen to with the lights off on a rainy day. Just close your eyes and feel the song out. Because I can go on about technical details of it all day long. I don't really think that adds much to somebody's experience while listening to it. But I did start thinking about the title, Silence Teaches Us How to Speak. It's an evocative title, and I think it's pretty clear about what it means. But I started thinking about the ideas of longing and regret, negativity, feeling lost, feeling unable to speak. I kind of landed a little bit towards depression. And I came upon a slight inversion of the title. Silence teaches us how to speak is a bit less common of a phrase, but we can actually see this represented in another, way more popular phrase, death teaches us how to live. And I wonder if this isn't a sonic representation of that, how to move on after losing someone close to you, how to feel like you can't wake up the next day, trying to build your life back up from nothing, trying to give yourself a voice again. I don't know if that's necessarily how Ulver interprets this, their intention behind it. And we haven't hit the lyrics yet. Maybe there's something in there that provides some insight. And again, the last like 40%, I'm a bit lost on. I don't really have an easy way of tying this interpretation into that part of the song, but I feel it in that first half, give or take. I think it works. This idea of finding out who you are by listening. I think that's my favorite part about the line itself, the title of the song, Silence Teaches You How to Sing. Yeah, I mean, you learn how to sing by singing, right? Someone teaches you how to sing, but I think it's more important also just to listen. Not necessarily to people singing, but listen to when people aren't. Silence, I think, in this case is a bit more of a soft silence. Sure, it can be absolute silence, complete blackness of audio. But I also think it's just being attentive to that around you. It's kind of difficult to be anywhere that's totally silent. And I think that's why I kind of deviate a little bit away from that pitch black type of silence into just general sound. Even right now, I have a ceiling fan going on, creating a little bit of white noise. I have an air purifier creating a little bit of white noise. The house creaks. There's little things going on there. It's never silent. And that's just in a house. You go out into nature, you go out into a forest. Good luck finding silence. But if you listen to all of that, you can find things to grow from it. I think this is important too, listening to people talk. Although this, I think, deviates quite a bit from the intention of the line. But I think it's more about being silent yourself, not trying to talk over people in a conversation, not just waiting for your turn to speak, but actively listening to what the other person is saying to you. You can learn a lot by being silent, by engaging in silence. I don't know how much of this is baked into the song. I don't even know if I can attribute some of what I just said to the music itself. Like I said, I believe it might deviate quite a bit from the intention of the title, but the fact that the song made me think about stuff like that, I think justifies its inclusion in talking about the song. Let me find some lyrics to this. We'll see what's going on there. Let's see if that changes my perspective on any of this. Well, yes and no. There's only one line to this entire song. "Oh Lord, take my pain away." That fits. That fits with my understanding of the song being about, not being happy where you are. Whether that's longing, wanting something that you don't have, the elements of regret I felt in here, the melancholic components to the song. It's not a comfortable song at all. There's nothing really joyous or positive in it. And for it to represent somebody who is in this kind of pain, I think it does a great job of that, multifaceted as it is. But it doesn't really add much to the song. I already knew the song was full of pain. But there is something that stands out to me, though. It is one line, sure, but it's repeated at least 16 times. Maybe more, honestly. It felt like more. It's the repetition. It becomes a mantra of sorts. It becomes so important to this person to repeat this phrase. And I think that can be taken two different ways. Either things are getting worse and they continue to say this in hopes that it can make things better. It's the only thing that gives them any sort of hope. Or it does make them feel better and they've become addicted to saying it. It's become a bit of a ritual. If I say this, I won't feel as low anymore. And so you just kind of say it all the time. Maybe even it loses some of its effectiveness as a, well, if nothing else, as a placebo. I think that's why the song might gravitate a little bit towards. Well, actually, this is something. I mentioned that the song gravitates away from that heavy, eerie darkness at the beginning, and we kind of push towards not necessarily positive or bright sounds, but just not as ominous as where the song begins. By the end of the song, though, we've pushed back into some of that. The final bits of I guess like the final 5 minutes brings back those chirps, it brings back the drone. It gets heavy again. Maybe that's what it's about, a losing of effectiveness of something that helped you feel better. I don't know. I feel like I'm so woefully uh, under. It's beyond my ability to provide a strong understanding of this track. But I hope I've given, if nothing else, y'all something to think about, maybe a jumping off board for your own understanding and building of a relationship with this song. Trying to figure out what it means to you. Those are my thoughts. Ulver's Silence Teaches You How to Sing. What did you think of it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation of the music or the lyrics. Put all of that and any other thoughts you might have down in the comment section. Above that, if you could, head into the description box. You'll find a link for Linktree in there. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.